You ever been so hungry your stomach starts talking to you louder than the people in the room? That's where I was, sitting in my son's fancy New York apartment, smelling lobster butter and garlic bread like a slap in the face, while my daughter-in-law, Tasha, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Sorry, Ma. No extra food tonight." For a second I thought she was joking. I chuckled, weak and tired, thinking maybe she'd say, "I'm playing. Grab a plate." But she didn't. She turned right back to that stove, serving her mama, her brother, and her 2 kids like they were royalty. Steam rising off those red shells, music playing, laughter echoing through the kitchen. And me? I was sitting in the corner of that living room, invisible as the dust on the shelf. You know what's funny? When you get old, people stop seeing you. You become a background prop in their picture-perfect lives. They forget you once built those lives with your own 2 hands. But before I take you deeper into that night, let me rewind a little. 'Cause this story ain't just about one dinner. It's about how I got there, how I went from a woman with pride, a home, and dreams, to a poor old lady begging for scraps in her own family's kitchen. Before we roll on, if you're listening to this, hit that subscribe button and stick around. 'Cause what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about family and forgiveness. I was born in Harlem, back when the rent was low and dreams were high. My mama worked 2 jobs and my daddy, well, he disappeared before I could say daddy. By 17, I was a waitress at a diner off 125th, serving coffee to construction workers and taxi drivers. By 25, I had my first and only son, Marcus. Lord, that boy was my heart. I raised him on faith, grit, and cheap cereal. I skipped meals so he could eat. I lied about the rent being paid just to keep his spirit high. And for years, I thought I did right. He grew up, got himself a college degree, landed a tech job, and married that slick woman from Queens, Tasha. She came into our lives wearing designer heels and talking like she was the next Oprah. I was happy for him, I really was. I thought she'd love him like I did. But I was wrong. So damn wrong. The first time I met her, she hugged me with one arm, just one. That should have told me everything. After my health started failing, knees cracking, eyesight blurring, I couldn't keep up with my old apartment. The landlord wanted more rent, and my pension barely covered groceries. Marcus offered to take me in, said, "Ma, come live with us till you get back on your feet." I smiled through my tears, not realizing that moving in meant losing every piece of freedom I had left. When I arrived, the apartment looked like something out of a magazine. Polished marble, white curtains, and the smell of vanilla candles. But Tasha's eyes said, "Don't get too comfortable." She showed me to a small room that used to be the laundry space. Said they'd cleared it out for me. My bed was a foldable cot, tucked between the washing machine and the wall. Still, I told myself, be grateful. You're not on the streets. For the first few weeks, I stayed out the way. I cleaned quietly, helped with the kids, tried not to step on toes. But Tasha had a way of making sure I knew my place. She'd say things like, "Oh, Ma, don't worry about the fridge, we already planned dinner." Or, "You can heat up leftovers later." Leftovers later. That became my diet, cold rice, old soup, and whatever scraps were left after her family finished feasting. But that night, the no extra food night, was the one that broke me. It was a Friday. I remember 'cause the city outside was humming, taxis honking, sirens crying, that kind of restless New York rhythm. Tasha had been in the kitchen since noon. I could smell shrimp butter and something sweet. When I peeked in, she was plating lobster tails, melted butter, and lemon wedges. Her mother was there, dressed like she was going to church, and her brother had a beer in hand, laughing at some joke I couldn't hear. I stood by the door, clutching my little bowl of oatmeal, cold, half-eaten from breakfast. My stomach was twisting. "Smells good," I said softly. "You making a feast tonight?" She turned, smiled that fake smile that never reached her eyes, and said, "Yeah, we're celebrating family night. But sorry, Ma, no extra food tonight. I only made enough for us." I froze. My son was sitting at the table right there beside her. He looked up at me, hesitated, and then looked down again. Didn't say a word. That silence, it cut deeper than any words ever could. I wanted to shout, to ask him what happened to the boy who used to hold my hand and say, "Don't worry, Ma. I'll take care of you one day." But I didn't. I just nodded. Smiled like it didn't sting. and went back to my room. I sat on that cot, listening to the laughter float down the hall, the sound of their forks, their clinking glasses. It felt like they were toast into my humiliation, and that's when something inside me shifted, a kind of silence that wasn't weakness anymore. It was fuel. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't pray. I just stared at the cracked ceiling and thought, if they can eat like royalty while I starve under their roof, then maybe it's time this old lady reminded them who built that roof in the first place. People see an old woman sitting on a park bench and think her story ended long ago. But truth is, mine had chapters that would make most folks' hearts ache. See, I wasn't always the lady who got told there was no extra food. I used to be the one who made the food, stretching one meal into 3, feeding my son and half the block if I had to. New York's always been a city that'll love you 1 minute and crush you the next. Back in the 80s, I came here with nothing but a duffel bag and a prayer. I was 21, broke, and pregnant with Marcus. His father, well, he ghosted faster than a New York cab at rush hour. Said he wasn't ready for that kind of life. Funny thing is, neither was I. But life don't wait for readiness. It just happens, whether you're ready or not. I remember working double shifts at the diner on 125th and Lenox. I'd smell like grease and coffee. My feet blistered from standing 16 hours straight, but every dollar I earned went to that little boy sleeping in our one-room apartment. When he cried at night, I'd rock him in my arms and whisper, "One day, baby, we'll have a better life." And for a long while, I believed that. By the time Marcus hit middle school, I was pulling miracles. I'd clip coupons, buy clothes from thrift shops, and fix everything with duct tape and hope. He was a bright kid, sharp, polite, the kind that teachers loved. Every time he brought home a good grade, I'd tape it to the fridge like a badge of honor. That fridge was covered in dreams. Then came the day that made all me sacrifices worth it, his college acceptance letter. Lord, I cried so hard that envelope was soaked before I even opened it. Full scholarship. My baby boy made it. I remember saying to him, "Marcus, this is your ticket out. Just promise me one thing. Don't forget where you came from." He hugged me tight, said, "Never, Ma, I'll make you proud." And he did. At least for a while. When he graduated, he landed a tech job downtown. Good money, fancy office, whole new world. I couldn't stop bragging to everyone at church. "My son works in the city," I'd say, like I'd birthed a CEO. That's when Tasha came in. She was slick, real polished, nails done, words sharp. First time she visited, she brought me flowers. I thought, well, ain't she sweet? But sweet things can fool you. Sugar and poison look the same in a bowl. You just don't know till you taste it. Tasha worked in marketing, always in her phone, talking about building brands and networking. I didn't understand half of it, but Marcus adored her. He'd light up like Times Square every time she walked in. When they got married, I wore my best church hat and clapped like my hands would break. I was so proud, so sure that my son had found someone who'd stand beside him through anything. But money changes people. It don't happen overnight. It sneaks in quiet, like a draft under the door. First, it's small things. Your son don't call as often. The visits get shorter, the hugs tighter, but colder. Then come the excuses. "Work's been crazy, Ma." You wouldn't like our new neighborhood. It's all traffic and noise. And before you know it, months turn into years. Then one day I got that call. Marcus said, "Ma, we think it's best if you move in with us for a while. You shouldn't be living alone with your health issues." I was grateful, I won't lie. But beneath that gratitude was something else. Fear. 'Cause when people say for a while, it usually means until we figure out what to do with you. I packed my life into 2 boxes. Some clothes, family photos, and my old Bible. When I arrived at their apartment in Manhattan, I felt out of place instantly. Everything was spotless, white, and cold. No smell of food, no sound of laughter. Just the quiet hum of expensive loneliness. Tasha greeted me with that smile again, half polite, half pity. She said, "We're so happy to have you, Ma. I set up a space for you in the laundry room. It's temporary, of course." Temporary. He told myself it was fine, but deep down, I felt the sting of being put where machines go to clean other people's mess. Days turned into weeks. I tried to help, wash dishes, fold laundry, cook a little. But Tasha always stopped me. "Oh no, Ma, I've got that handled." At first I thought she was being kind. Then I realized she just didn't want me touching her fancy things. Marcus was gone most days, working late, always tired. The kids barely looked up from their screens. I became a shadow, moving quiet, eating what was left, sleeping when I could. Every night I'd whisper to myself, "You raised a good man. He'll notice soon. He'll see how they treat you." But that day never came. You know, they say every mother's love got limits. But I didn't believe that until I found myself eating crackers in the dark, while my family had steak in the next room. Still, I stayed quiet. 'Cause what else could I do? When you're old, people act like your voice don't matter. But silence don't mean weakness, it means patience. And patience, well, that's what turns heartbreak into revenge. That night after the no extra food humiliation, I lay awake remembering every time I'd gone hungry so Marcus could eat. Every time I'd said I'm fine when I wasn't. My body was old, but my heart. Oh, it was still fire. It made a promise to myself. They think I'm invisible. I'll show them just how seen I can be. And that's where the real story begins, not in the kitchen where they feasted, but in the quiet corner where I started plotting my comeback. They say when you live under someone's roof, you play by their rules. But nobody told me the rules would keep changing just to make me lose. After that no extra food night, I started seeing everything differently. Every smile from Tasha looked faker. Every "Ma, you okay?" felt like a line she rehearsed. And my son, Lord Marcus, he'd become a ghost in his own house. Walked in late, barely looked at me, and disappeared into his office like I was a stranger off the street. I learned quick, this wasn't my home. It was a hotel where I wasn't paying rent, and my stay had overstayed its welcome. Every morning, I'd wake up before everyone else. The house would still be quiet, the city outside humming low. I'd make myself coffee, instant, cheap, and sit by the small window in the laundry room. That tiny square of light was the only part of the house that felt mine. I'd watch the sun hit the skyline, all golden and proud, and whisper, "You're still here, girl. Don't let 'em break you." But Tasha had a way of reminding me where I stood. She started small, hiding little things, like my tea bags or the sugar jar. Then she'd say, "Oh, you must have misplaced it, Ma." Next came the thermostat. She'd keep the apartment cold as a fridge, saying she didn't like the heat. My bones ached from it. When I'd ask her to turn it up, she'd smile and say, "You can grab an extra blanket if you're chilly." And the food? Lord, don't get me started on that. She cooked like she was feeding a whole restaurant, shrimp, steak, pasta, all kinds of things. But somehow there was never enough for me. If I made my own little meal, she'd comment, "Oh, Ma, that smells a little strong, don't you think?" It was like breathing in her air was a crime. One night, I made soup. Just soup, potatoes, onions, and a bit of chicken I bought with my own money. She came home, wrinkled her nose, and said, "Did you use my pot?" Her pot. As if the woman who raised her husband wasn't allowed to touch her damn cookware. Marcus stood right there, silent again. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, to remind his wife who made him the man he is, but he didn't. He just rubbed his neck and said, "Let's not make this a thing, Tasha. Not make this a thing." Boy, I could have screamed, but I didn't. I learned that in this house my voice was a problem, and my silence was expected. Days started blurring together. I'd do laundry, clean the kitchen after everyone left, and take care of the kids when Tasha needed her me time. Don't get me wrong, I loved those grandbabies. They were innocent in all this, but even they started picking up their mama's ways. The little one, Ava, once said, "Mommy says you don't help enough." That hit harder than it should have. When a child sees you as a burden, you start wondering when you became one. There were moments I wanted to pack up and leave, but where would I go? My savings were gone. Rent in New York was sky high, and the shelter waitlists were endless. So I stayed, swallowed my pride, bit my tongue, and waited for the day I'd have enough. Enough strength, enough reason, enough fire to stand up again. It came sooner than I thought. One afternoon, I was dusting the living room. Tasha was out and Marcus was working from home. His office door was cracked open, and I heard him on the phone. He said, "Yeah, man, my mom's here for now. It's been tough, but you know how it is. Old folks can't really take care of themselves anymore." I froze mid-dust. Then he laughed and said, "Yeah, Tasha's being a saint putting up with her. I owe her big time, a saint, for letting me breathe her air, eat her leftovers, and sleep beside a washing machine." That night, I didn't say a word to either of them. But when I went to bed, I stared at the ceiling and felt something deep inside me snap. Not loud, not angry. Just quiet and certain. I realized the boy I raised was gone, and in his place stood a man who valued comfort over compassion. From that day on, I stopped trying to fit in. If I wanted to sit in the living room, I sat. If I wanted to make tea, I made it. When she rolled her eyes, I smiled wider. And when she whispered to Marcus about boundaries, I pretended not to hear. But the thing about people who think they're untouchable, they always go too far. One Saturday night, they threw a dinner party. Tasha's family, her coworkers, and even her church friends. I helped clean all day, scrubbed the counters, set the table, ironed napkins, and by the time guests arrived, I was so tired I could barely stand. Still, I put on my best sweater and stepped out, hoping maybe I could sit with them, be part of the celebration. But when I went to take a seat, Tasha blocked me with her hand. "Oh, Ma," she said, smiling that same poisonous smile. "We're full up at the table. You can eat later, okay? Later, always later." I nodded, turned away, and went back to my little room. But before I shut the door, I caught a glimpse of her through the reflection of the hallway mirror, laughing, toast in a glass, living her perfect little life. And I swear, something in her eyes sparkled like she enjoyed seeing me shrink. That's when I knew. This wasn't just neglect anymore. It was sport. She got joy from watching me fall apart, so I started planning. Not revenge out of anger, revenge out of justice. I wasn't going to scream or fight. I was going to teach her the kind of lesson life once taught me. When you break someone who's fed you, life finds a way to feed you back your own poison. I didn't know how yet, but I could feel it, coming like a storm off the Hudson. And this time it wouldn't miss. That night still plays in my head like a movie I can't turn off. Same scene, same smell, same silence cutting through me like glass. I swear, even if I live to 100, I'll still hear her voice echoing. "Sorry, Ma, no extra food tonight." It was a Friday in late November. The city was already dressed for Christmas, lights in every window, folks rushing down sidewalks with shopping bags and smiles. But inside that apartment, joy had a different meaning. See, Tasha had planned a big dinner, said her mama and brother were coming over. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd include me this time. I'd even put on my best cardigan, brushed my hair, and polished the little silver cross my mama gave me back in the day. Hope makes fools out of people sometimes. Around 6, the kitchen started smelling like heaven. Garlic butter, lemon, fresh herbs. I peeked in and saw lobster tails sizzling in the pan, steam rising like perfume. On the counter sat salad bowls, baked potatoes, even cheesecake chillin' in the fridge. It wasn't dinner, it was a celebration. "Smells wonderful," I said, standing at the doorway trying to sound cheerful. Tasha turned, flashing that smile of hers, the one that looked warm till you noticed the ice behind it. "Oh, hey, Ma. Yeah, we're doing something special tonight." I waited for her to say, "Grab a plate," or, "You're part of this family, come sit." But instead, she wiped her hands, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Sorry, Ma, no extra food tonight." "I only made enough for us." The words hit harder than a slap. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Maybe she said no extra work tonight. But no. She said what she said. Marcus was sitting at the table already, scrolling through his phone. I looked at him, waiting, begging for him to say something. Anything. He looked up, saw my face, and then looked back down, mumbling, "It's just one night. Ma, just one night," I wanted to scream. "Boy, I raised you. I went hungry so you could eat. You wearing shoes I bought with tears." But the words got stuck in my throat like dry bread. Instead, I nodded, smiled like it didn't hurt, and said softly, "Of course, baby. Y'all enjoy." Then I turned and walked back to my room. I sat on that cot, the same one squeezed between the washer and dryer, staring at the peeling paint on the wall. I could hear him laughing out there, Tasha's mama talking loud, her brother telling jokes, the kids giggling. Every sound was a reminder that I didn't belong, and the smell, the butter, The lemon, the seafood, it hung in the air, taunting me. I thought of all the dinners I'd made for Marcus when we had nothing. The nights we shared ramen noodles and called it fancy night. The birthdays where I baked cakes from scratch, singing off key just to make him smile. And now, he couldn't even hand me a biscuit. After an hour, my stomach was growling so loud it embarrassed me, even though no one could hear. I pulled out a can of soup I'd hidden in my drawer, poured it into a mug, and heated it up in the microwave. The hum of that machine drowned out their laughter for a moment, and I was grateful. But when the soup was done, and I took that first sip, I started crying. Not loud, not sobbing, just quiet tears that burned my cheeks. I wasn't crying because I was hungry. I was crying because I realized I'd become invisible in the house I helped build. Then something inside me shifted. I stopped crying. I wiped my face and whispered, "Never again." You see, that night wasn't the first time she disrespected me, but it was the last time she got away with it. Because while they were eating lobster and laughing like I didn't exist, I was remembering things. Little things. Like how Marcus had all his mail delivered to my old apartment, because he still hadn't changed the address. Like how I still had access to his bank's joint savings account, the one I'd opened for him when he was 18. He probably forgot I was even on it. And like how Tasha had left her laptop open on the table more than once, showing things she didn't want seen, text messages, photos, little secrets that could ruin her perfect image. Revenge don't always start with anger. Sometimes it starts with silence and a sharp memory. A few days later, Marcus came home late from work. I was in the kitchen making tea. He looked tired, loosened his tie, and said, "Tasha's going through some stuff, Ma. Try to be patient with her, okay?" "Patient?" I asked, my voice calm. "I've been patient for months." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "You know how she gets. She's just stressed. Stressed. That word again. Funny how people use stressed as a pass for cruelty." I smiled and said, "Of course, baby. I'll give her all the patience in the world." But deep down, I'd already decided, the next time she tried to humiliate me, I'd be ready. Not with anger, with power. And I didn't have to wait long. The next weekend, Tasha hosted another dinner, this time for her church ladies, the kind who talk about blessings while gossiping between prayers. She told me, "Ma, maybe stay in your room tonight, okay? The apartment's a little full." I nodded, smiled sweetly, and said, "Of course, dear." But I didn't stay in my room. I waited till everyone was seated, till the laughter filled the house again. Then I stepped out, calm and steady, wearing my best Sunday dress. Tasha froze mid-sentence when she saw me. "Oh, Ma, I didn't know you were." I cut her off with a smile. "Don't mind me, sweetheart. Just making some tea." I walked to the kitchen, slow and deliberate, and as I passed that table full of her guests, I heard one of them whisper, "She's so elegant. Looks just like a queen." That comment made Tasha's jaw tighten. I could have left it at that, but no, God had something poetic in mind. 'Cause that night, while she laughed and posed for pictures, I noticed her laptop sitting on the counter, screen still lit up. And on that screen, messages. From another man. The kind of messages that would burn her holy image to the ground. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I just smiled, finished my tea, and went back to my room. But as I lay down that night, the plan started formulating, slow, sharp, and certain. Tasha thought she could humiliate me, starve me, erase me. She was about to learn that even the quietest woman in the house can shake the walls when she chooses to rise. There's a funny kind of clarity that comes right after you've been stepped on for the last time. It's not loud or dramatic. It's a cold, clean thing that sits in your chest and tells you exactly what to do. That's what happened to me. After the lobster nights, the whispered jokes, and the wearful lines, something inside me stopped being soft. It hardened. It sharpened. And it started to think. For days I moved like a ghost, quiet, careful, collecting scraps of information like a woman gathering kindling for a fire. Auntie Ethel used to say, "When you are about to change your life, you start paying attention to the little things." Lord, Auntie was right. I learned how Tasha kept receipts folded in her purse, how she left her phone on the table with the screen lit, how Marcus left his mail in a corner and forgot to change his address. I learned that even rich folks have sloppy habits. One rainy Wednesday, Tasha went out with her friends and left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. The cursor blinked like it was winking. I poured myself some tea and pretended to hum along to the radio while I scrubbed a pan. My hands were steady, my heart steady. I walked by, glanced and saw the messages again. Flirty, inappropriate, the kind men send when they think they can hide in the dark. It burned me, not because she was sinning, but because she hid behind piety while she disrespected the people she lived with. Hypocrisy tastes worse than any bitter medicine. I thought of Marcus, of the boy I raised who now avoided my eyes. I thought of all the nights I covered his face with a blanket when he had a fever, of the stitches I'd held closed with my shaky hands, of the time I pawned my watch so he could get a jacket for an interview. He deserved better than this woman's coldness, not because she was perfect, but because she owed him decency. And decency, I remembered, can be demanded. Lucky for me, memory is a tool. So is knowledge, and I had both. I remembered the bank paperwork from years ago. The little joint account I opened when Marcus was young. The one we kept for emergencies. He'd never closed it when he left. He'd even given me a debit card just in case. I still had that card tucked inside my Bible, under a prayer card. I'd used it once, years back, to pay for a doctor's visit, and he never questioned it. People forget what they never needed to remember. I started small. I read Tasha's emails when she logged off and left the laptop open. I learned the names of her friends, the charities she liked to pretend she funded, the weekend rituals she kept for show. I learned who in her circle liked to gossip and who liked to judge. These were useful things. Knowledge is louder than any shout in a room full of people. Next came the bank. I walked down to the branch one afternoon, my cane clicking against the marble floor, the kid at the desk, his tie crooked, his eyes like a man who spent too many nights on his phone, smiled when he saw me. "How can I help you, ma'am?" he asked. I handed over the debit card and a photocopy of my ID. I told him I needed to check on a balance. He typed, clicked, and printed the statement. The numbers looked like a phone number to someone else's life. Big deposits, automatic transfers, a few suspicious withdrawals. Things that didn't add up to tight budget talk. I didn't need to steal money. I didn't need to be dramatic. I just needed leverage, a way to open the door when the time came. Power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it's a stapled bank statement and a memory of how your son used to look at you when you walked into a room. Back at the apartment, I started small maneuvers. I made extra loaves of bread and left them behind the sugar jar where Tasha always looked but never bothered to check. I left a folded bank letter on the counter where Marcus would see it, the envelope addressed to my name. The next morning, Marcus picked it up, glanced at the return address, and shoved it into the pile of bills on the table. He didn't read it. He rarely read anything that didn't have a glowing screen attached. That night, I caught my grandbaby Ava drawing in the living room. I sat down beside her and asked about her day. She told me gossip kids had said at school, things like, "My mommy buys me toys," or "My grandma lives in a mansion." Kids are little mirrors. They show you what adults whisper in the dark. Ava's blurted confessions made me ache and lit a stubborn pride in me. If she thought my story was shameful, then I had to set the record straight in a way that would stick. I considered calling the bank and transferring small legal amounts to my account. But money by itself wouldn't teach them anything. If I wanted them to truly feel the weight of what they'd done, I needed to use what they prized, image, reputation, and comfort, against them. So I began to play the long game. I would not yell or storm out. I would not become the angry old woman on the stoop. I would be clever and invisible and utterly lethal in my patience. I started leaving small notes, the kind that looked like bills or bank notices, in places where Tasha's friends would find them. A flyer slipped into a magazine with family counseling services stamped on it. A church pamphlet about honest living left on the coffee table. Little reminders that marriage and faith require work, and that secret things come out sooner or later. At the same time, I began to reconnect with the neighborhood I'd left behind. I started visiting the laundromat on 125th again, sitting on a bench and letting the world move around me. People remembered me. Old faces nodded, young ones smiled. Word travels fast in small communities. I found out who still cared and who would be willing to help. A woman named Rosa, who sold hot pretzels, said she'd watch my back. A retired paralegal, Mr. Daniels, offered to help me sort through paperwork if I needed it. I didn't ask for pity. I asked for allies. My plan wasn't to destroy. It was to expose, to make the truth visible enough that even pride would have to bend. I knew Tasha loved the church lady's approval, the halls of her workplace, the polished image she maintained. If that image faltered, if the people who fed her ego started to whisper, she'd feel it where it hurt. So I began to mold the clay slowly, hints here, a printed message there, a few well-placed questions to Marcus when he left his laptop unlocked. I let seeds fall where they would. I prayed too, not the kind of prayer that begs, but the kind that plans. Prayer and strategy, both old friends of mine, worked together quietly. This was not petty revenge. It was reclamation. I was not just fighting for a warm plate. I was fighting for dignity, for a legacy, for the truth that mothers and grandmothers are not disposable. And when the time came to act, it would be precise and clean. The kind of justice that's hard to argue with because it's built on fact, not on loud accusation. By the time the next big dinner rolled around, I had more than patience. I had a map, and on that map, every lie, every slight, every stolen glance had its place. They thought I was invisible. They were about to find out how loud silence can be. That week before the dinner, the apartment felt like a pressure cooker. I moved through it like a careful cat. Soft steps, quieter than the hum of the refrigerator. Everyone was busy prepping for Tasha's big charity brunch the next day, a whole show of casseroles and blessings that would flood her Instagram by nightfall. She was polishing plates in her halo, smiling extra wide at every guest who stepped through the door. I watched her put on that performance and thought, that halo's glued on too tight. I kept my map folded in my pocket like a secret prayer. Little by little, the seeds I'd planted had begun to sprout. A church lady found the counseling pamphlet in the coffee table and texted another about how everyone needs to check their hearts. A co-worker of Tasha's mentioned an odd bank receipt left on the counter, asking if anyone else had seen it. A neighbor joked about the humble lady who prefers to sit alone. Word is a river. It finds the cracks. On the morning of the brunch, I did two small things that seemed harmless but were, in truth, the final nudges. First, I made a batch of her favorite lemon bars and left them on the counter with a note. From one who remembers baking for her children. Silly? Maybe. But the note landed in the hands of a nosy guest who read everything a little too loudly. Second, I took Tasha's laptop. She'd left it unlocked and sleeping on the kitchen island when she rushed out to greet her guests, and I opened one harmless file, a draft email with a few names in it. I didn't snoop beyond what was necessary. I only wanted something small enough to tempt a pair of curious eyes, and true enough to begin a chain. Later, when she left the laptop alone again to help her friend with the tablecloth, I stepped into the doorway and let someone else do the rest. You see, that's what I'd learned. You don't need to shove the truth down people's throats. You just need to put it where they can't help but taste it. One of her church friends, Mrs. Fletcher, bless her heart, happened to be the kind of woman who loved a scandal wrapped in a hymn. She leaned over the counter, saw the draft, and hummed under her breath. "This can't be right," she whispered. Her eyes skimmed, and the bus below her lips turned into a rumor. A phone came out. Texts were sent. Whispers began. By the time the lemon bars were halfway gone, the pleasant chatter shifted into low, prickly questions. I watched from the doorway as Tasha's smile lost its edges. She excused herself, said something about the restroom, and fled into her room. I followed slow as molasses. In the quiet of her bedroom, she was a different woman, hands trembling, shoulders folding, mask gone. I stood in the doorway and felt zero joy. This was not pleasure. This was reckoning. I only wanted truth, not cruelty. When she came back out, Marcus had heard enough to ask a question. "Tash, what's this?" he said, holding up his phone where a message thread glowed. Her face shifted, a color I'd never seen, then practiced denial. "It's nothing, babe. Just work stuff." But the tone had a crack in it. The church ladies circled like moths. Someone asked Tasha about her commitments at work, and another quietly asked about balancing family life. The questions were soft but precise blades. In the crowd, Tasha's mother made a show of defending her daughter. Of course she would. Mothers will always stand in front of their children's shadows. But when a few women who'd once praised Tasha's devotion leaned in with furrowed brows, the illusion started to wobble. People who had been charmed by her facade saw, for the first time, the small hypocrisy that had always been there. Charity photos and late-night texts, Sunday smiles and secret rendezvous. The house that fed on image started to choke on it. Marcus stood frozen in the middle of it, his face a portrait of confusion that slowly melted into shame. For the first time since I moved in, his eyes found mine. No words, just that slow sinking recognition. I felt pity. I felt sorrow. I thought of the nights I'd covered him when he was feverish, the stitches, the times I'd held him up when he wanted to give up. The boy I raised was looking at the woman he loved and realizing the cost of his silence. When the brunch ended, it didn't end as pretty as it began. Some folks slipped out with tight smiles. A few of Tasha's friends sent her texts that read like arrests. One of the church ladies, fierce in her righteousness, pulled me aside. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. "Ma'am," she said softly, "you taught a powerful lesson today." Power, I realized then, wasn't about making someone suffer publicly. It was about allowing the truth to stand where lies had built an altar. That night, Tasha and Marcus fought. I could hear muffled words through the wall. "You humiliated me. You gave me no choice. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" The words bounced back and forth, sharp and small. I pressed my ear to the old radiator and thought about all the things unsaid in our house, how silence had become a tool for everyone but me. Their fight wasn't a victory, not for me. It was a crack in the dam. And in that crack, water began to creep through. 2 days later, Marcus came to me at the kitchen table. He looked like a man who'd been washed in cold water. He didn't raise his voice. He sat down, held my hands like he used to when he was small, and said, "Ma, I'm sorry. I see it now." Those words felt like a confession and a mourning. I wanted to push him away, to make him earn every apology. But the truth is, I still loved the boy who used to fall asleep on my lap. I squeezed his fingers and said, "It's about teaching the truth, baby, not crushing folks for sport." He promised to help fix things. Whether he could or not, that would be the measure of his heart. Tasha retreated into herself. Her social circle shifted, and the hollow applause she once collected thinned. She defended herself at first, then retreated. I didn't gloat. I watched, careful and guarded. I'd wanted balance, not a public pile-on. When the people who had fed her ego began to doubt her, she learned a humility that no sermon could have taught. The turning point wasn't a single blow. It was a series of small, true things that added up until the house couldn't stand its own weight. My plan had always been slow and surgical. Let the truth do the heavy lifting. And truth, even when wrapped in lemon bars and drafts, is a thing that moves faster than deceit. That night, as I lay back on my cot, I felt the apartment breathe differently. There was an ache, there always is when things break, but also a kind of quiet that smelled like possibility. The war had begun, but it wasn't the scream-filled kind. It was the kind you win with dignity, patience, and a stubborn refusal to be invisible any longer. And somewhere between the hush of the washing machine and the far-off honk of a cab, I smiled, a small, sure smile that told me I'd taken the first real step back toward my throne. The house didn't crumble overnight, but you could feel the cracks spreading through the walls. Conversations got shorter, laughter sounded forced, and every dinner turned into an awkward, silent play. You know the kind, everyone pretending the script ain't changed, even though the lines don't fit anymore. Tasha stopped cooking big meals. No more lobster, no more fancy takeout. The air smelled of reheated leftovers and guilt. For the first time since I'd moved in, she asked me if I wanted something to eat. The words were stiff, like she'd never said them before. I just smiled and said, "No, baby. You go on ahead. I already ate." Truth is, I hadn't eaten yet. But revenge feeds you in strange ways. Marcus started spending more time with me, helping with groceries, asking about my old friends, even fixing the heater that had been rattling for months. He said he was making it up to me, but I could see he was really trying to make it up to himself. When guilt bites deep, people reach for bandages that don't exist. Tasha kept her distance for a while, avoiding my eyes. I'd catch her in the hallway sometimes, fidgeting with her phone, staring at me like she was trying to read a language she'd never learned. One night, she came to my room, her makeup off, her voice softer than I'd ever heard. "Ma," she started, hesitant. "I know you don't owe me a thing, but I'm sorry. I didn't realize how cold I was. Life got loud, and I stopped listening. I didn't jump to forgive her. I let the silence stretch until it became heavy enough to mean something. Then I said, 'You knew what you were doing, Tasha. But maybe now you know what it feels like to be hungry when the food's right there.'" She nodded. Her eyes shone with something that might have been shame. "You taught me a lesson I won't forget," she said before walking away. Maybe she meant it. Maybe she didn't. But that night, I slept with a peace I hadn't felt in years. A few weeks passed, and the fallout kept rolling. Her so-called friends stopped calling. The church ladies whispered. Word about her charity talk and private messages had done its rounds like wildfire through dry grass. Nobody knew where the story started, but they sure knew where it landed. Marcus didn't defend her like before. He didn't humiliate her either, he just saw her clearly for the first time. That kind of clarity hurts. Their home felt less like a castle and more like a waiting room. One morning, Marcus asked me if I'd ever thought of moving back into my old neighborhood. I told him no. I'd had enough of being forgotten in corners. He said maybe it was time we sold the apartment and started fresh somewhere smaller. I smiled and said, "Do what you gotta do, baby. Just make sure you ain't building another house of lies." That week, he helped me open a small account of my own. This time, it wasn't just in case, it was mine. He transferred a modest sum for everything you've done for me, Ma. I didn't argue. I took it like a woman who'd earned every penny with her silence, her scars, and her strategy. But life ain't a movie. It doesn't wrap up clean. A few months later, Marcus got sick. Nothing serious, but serious enough to land him in the hospital for a while. Tasha visited every day, dutiful, quiet, remorseful. Maybe she'd changed, maybe not. But I saw the way she looked at him, like she was finally afraid of losing what she'd taken for granted. I stayed by his side too. When he dozed off, I sat there watching the city lights through the window, thinking about how fragile everything was. Trust, love, family. You can spend your whole life building a house with people, only to realize they'd been leaving cracks in the foundation since day one. When Marcus came home, we were a different family. Not healed, just aware. Tasha spoke softer now, cooked more simple meals, even left extra portions in the fridge labeled for Grandma. The irony didn't escape me. The woman who once said no extra food now made sure I had enough. One night, while washing dishes, she looked at me and said, "You really showed me who I am." I looked up and replied, "Nah, sweetheart. I just held up a mirror. You did the rest. But revenge, even the quiet kind, doesn't end clean. There's always a price." Ava, my sweet grandbaby, picked up on the tension more than anyone realized. Kids always do. One afternoon, she asked, "Grandma, why don't you and Mommy laugh together?" I froze. What could I tell her? That laughter dies where respect does? That some wounds don't need to bleed to hurt? I hugged her tight and whispered, "Because grown-ups forget sometimes, baby. But we'll find it again." That night, I prayed for forgiveness, not from God, but from myself. I had done what I needed to survive, to reclaim my dignity, but deep down I wished things could have been different. I wished I'd never had to fight for a place at my own family's table. The seasons changed. Marcus recovered. Tasha found a quieter job. Less spotlight, more substance. And me, I started writing again. Letters mostly. Small stories about women who refused to disappear. I even sent one to a local paper. They published it under the title, The Empty Plate. People reached out, neighbors, strangers, other grandmothers from the city, telling me they'd felt the same pain, the same loneliness. Turns out my story wasn't just mine. It belonged to every woman who's been told she's extra. Every elder who's been made invisible. Every soul who's ever sat at a full table with an empty plate. I guess that's the real revenge, not seeing others crumble. But standing tall in the truth, they tried to bury you under. Sometimes I still think about that night, the lobster, the laughter, the lies. And every time I do, I whisper to myself, they thought I was hungry for food. But I was starving for respect. Now I eat well, not because someone serves me, but because I finally learned to feed myself with peace, with pride, with the kind of quiet that screams louder than any argument. So if you're out there listening, somewhere in a tiny kitchen, or a cold apartment in this big old city, remember this. Don't let anyone tell you you're extra. Don't let them starve your spirit just because they can't handle your truth. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply surviving with your dignity intact. And if you ever find yourself sitting at a table where love feels rationed, stand up. You don't have to beg for a bite of what you built, because grandma's learned, real queens don't wait for permission to eat. They cook their own feast,